welcome everybody to our church here. And I'm just going to give you a little introduction for Sarah, the speaker. Sarah Joy Covey is a registered psychotherapist and the clinical director of Covey Wellness Center in Alville. With a Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology and a background in education, she has spent the last 10 years walking alongside individuals and couples in the pursuit of healing and growth. Sarah's work is uniquely focused on the integration of Christian spirituality and psychology, offering a thoughtful and faith-sensitive approach to issues like life transitions, relational dynamics, and emotional well-being. She blends evidence-based practices in the counseling field with a deep respect for spiritual formation and theological insight. Outside of her clinical role, Sarah has been married for 25 years and is the proud mom of 4 red-headed children.
You know, pray for me. Female or male? 1 girl, 3 boys. Oh boy. Girl's the oldest. Yeah. And my husband is not a redhead, so pray for him too.
She's a devoted reader and writer, a lover of tea and music, and a passionate advocate for whole person wellness. Her warm, grounded presence and depth of perspective make her a sought-after speaker, supervisor, and guide in both therapeutic and ministry spaces. And she also does Bible study here for us sometimes.
Yeah, this is my home church. 25 years ago, I was married in this church. So we have and I have a daughter, my oldest, who's getting married and probably will be married in this church also.
So did you get married when you were like 12?
I did. That's correct. Hold that thought. I got married young, but I am 49. So do the math, right? Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming into this workshop. I'm really excited to be here. As we said in my intro, I have a background in education, so I was actually having this like teacher vibe coming back, preparing for today. I was making photocopies and I was putting stuff together and making notes and doing research, and I just thought, oh my goodness, like I love this integration where all of the things that God has graciously given me to do sort of come together in these intersectional spaces. So being able to teach and talk about health and wellness and spiritual health and all the things, this is really my sweet spot where I love to be. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you in that capacity today. I'm going to focus, I believe we have 45 minutes, so I'm going to try to be, I'm going to actually even set myself a little stopwatch, not a stopwatch, she has a stopwatch, so I know how much we are, how far we're going, because I have a tendency to get really excited and want to go on for a long time about things that I'm passionate about. And so I know they're going to involve me in the Q&A a little bit later, but I do want to leave it open if there's a little bit of a question at the end. So I'll try to leave 5 or 10 minutes for a couple of questions at the end.
I'm your timekeeper.
She's the timekeeper. Okay, Janice will keep me in line, so that's good. So interestingly, when Linda asked me, and Janice, I forget whether it's Linda or Janice or both of them on the same day, asked me about being a part of this, I thought, I can absolutely talk about caring for the caregiver, but I was feeling a little bit of an imposter syndrome because I thought, I don't have that specific experience with the Alzheimer's and dementia piece specifically. So we're going to speak about that a little bit, but the focus is really going to be on the caregiving because that's where my experience and background in education lies. But what I had wanted to do this for you, I have a surprise for you, but it's kind of like a story and then a surprise. So my longtime executive assistant at Covey Wellness Center, who retired this week, that's another prayer request. That's 3 so far. But she's wonderful. Her name is Tanya, and she has been on a 10-year so far journey of caregiving for her mom, who has dementia. And so I had wanted to bring her and interview her and to talk a little bit about her experience as part of today. And as it turned out, she also is a mom of 4, and her daughter had a big housewarming party, which was conflicting with the dates, and so she couldn't be here. But what we did do for you is on the Covey Wellness Center podcast, the most recent episode is on caregiver fatigue and stress. And so that's my conversation with Tanya. That was her, we have a podcast going all the time. I don't know why it didn't occur to me to do that, but she was the brainchild of that and said, Sarah, why don't we do a podcast excuse me, and then we can have it available to all of our listeners, because it's such an important topic, and I was preparing for that anyway. And then my interview with her was captured there. So that's another resource. And I have another handout that I'll give to you at the end, but you can find the Covey Wellness Center podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're not a podcast person, you can go to our website to free resources, podcast, and click away. There's lots of stuff on there that might be helpful to you, but the most recent one is specific to our day-to-day. So that's just a little bonus episode for you and something you can share in lieu of not being able to have Tanya here with me for that specific experience. So I wanted to really call this workshop, It's Hard for You Too. Because I think one of the things that is defining in at least the psychology literature is that people who are in caregiving roles are often what's called the silent sufferers. And the reason for that is they often do not feel free to express their own distress, or to have their own hard day, or to have their own needs, or to voice their own concerns or frustrations or feelings, because they are wanting to honor the person that they're caregiving, they're offering caregiving to. And so, you know, it's sort of in jest, I offer this example where, as you've heard already, I'm a mother of 4. My kids are now 22 to 14 in range. And so when they were little, I'm not a great person with little people. I was a high school teacher before, very specifically a high school teacher, not an elementary school teacher. Kids are a great way to start people, but I'm not really that skilled with that group. So I really struggled as a young mom in that caregiving role. And some of you probably have some of that experience that you can think about. And of course, sleep deprivation and all the things. And there are definitely days where it feels impossible to say, I don't like my children. I kind of hate them today, right? I love them, but I am not okay with these people that I am having to care for. And that's just the real and honest truth of the journey of caregiving. And that can be applied in so many ways. And all of your feelings and the ebbs and flows about what you're going through, all of it is normal. There's no right way to do this, and there's no judgment of how you are going through your caregiving journey. You just need to be sure that you have the support you need along the way, because it is a marathon. There's very few caregiving journeys that aren't a longer timeline. You know, sometimes it's short, but most often it's a longer go, and it begins, and even as Dana, I think it's Dana was sharing today, you know, it didn't happen overnight. It's a long journey. And so, I think sometimes in Christian spheres, we have a tendency to kind of moralize things where we're deciding what's right or wrong, or if we're good enough, or if we're doing it the right way, instead of recognizing that that's a broad journey that can be defined in lots of ways. And, you know, one example that my assistant gave there in our conversation was that at one point, you know, she had to work through giving herself permission to not visit her mom every week. This was sort of towards the end of COVID, where she had become the primary caregiver and the single person that was allowed to go into the home to care for her mom. Some of you might relate to those stories where it was at a time where multiple siblings couldn't come in, and she was really burnt out. And at one point she just had to say, I'm not a bad daughter, essentially, for going every other week if that's what I can manage. And some of those things, when you're in a caregiving role, we have a tendency to sort of decide and judge ourselves and criticize how we're caring or not caring, and if we're measuring up. And so I just want to be careful of how we speak to ourselves. This is a complex journey, and there isn't a formula. And if we had the formula, we would all do it, and it would all be working out perfectly. But life is messy, and so we take it day by day, and we want to honor the caregivers in the mix of that as well. Okay, so I've given you a note there. It's just got sort of some headings. I'm going to touch on some points, but these are kind of the key points from the research that are really important to offer as reminders and encouragement to people who are in caregiving roles. And so whether you find yourself in one of those roles right now, or whether you know of someone in a caregiving role, you're going to have a greater understanding of what is recommended as far as how we can offer really conscious and practical and clear care to them. So the first thing is actually just acknowledging and validating, as I said at the beginning, it is hard for the caregiver too. This is not just a journey that is isolated to the person with chronic illness or declining palliative care. They are not the only person involved in the dynamic of what is happening. The family members are, and of course, particularly the primary caregivers or closer family members or care providers, they are going through their own journey with this, even if it's not their illness. And that's where, again, they can sometimes get forgotten because the focus is on the person with the illness. And this isn't an either or, like the caregivers, you know, are raising up and the person with illness. It's a recognition that it's a both and, that it's a collective journey and it's different. And there are challenges for both. Like if we think about, say, a parent, both the spouse who is declining and the spouse who is caregiving, as an example. The spouse who's caregiving is as much a part of that journey and going through their own needs and challenges and griefs and loss and pain, and it just looks different. And so we want to honor both in that scenario, and then also extending, of course, to families and care providers. This also extends to people who are in caregiving fields. We're not going to get into this today, but certainly lots of us who are in helping fields who are constantly exhaling, if you will, pouring ourselves out into other people. There is a real cost to that and a compassion fatigue that can set in and a stress that goes along with that. So, you know, we don't want to lose ourselves in the mix of that. It's okay to consider ourselves and our needs and balance that with honest and loving care for the people we love. So I want to validate that there is an emotional weight that caregivers carry. It's often invisible. It's not as visible. In mental health, we talk about how mental health challenges are often largely misunderstood because they are invisible. You know, if I had to take time off work because I broke my back, no one would question that or wonder about that. But if I was struggling with mental health and I had to take time off work, people it doesn't make sense to them. And so in that sense, caregivers often are missed. And their own journeys are often more invisible as compared to the person directly going through the health journey. I also want to acknowledge that caregiving is in fact sacred work, right? There is a beautiful, Christ-like, compassionate care that is involved in helping. And I know the talk we just had upstairs talked about that it's missional. You are doing the good work of the hands and feet of God for the people that you are loving, whether that's your direct person that you're caregiving or as a congregation, if we're stepping in to support caregivers and their loved ones who are ill. It is a sacred thing to gather together, and it makes a difference. And for any of us who have been on the receiving end of any kind of that practical, tangible caregiving, if we have been the recipient of that, we recognize the profound difference that makes. And so I don't want you to discount that. It's meaningful, important work that you're doing, but it shouldn't cost you your health and your spirit in the mix of that. And so we have to find a balance where you can, if you take that full breath analogy, where you can be exhaling and giving out of yourself, but also finding ways to replenish that and breathe back in. And I know that's hard. We talk a lot about that in the podcast episode about the nuance of that. Sometimes it's not possible in different seasons. Sometimes it's not possible day to day. But having an awareness to say, this is a marathon. I am also a person whose health is important in the midst of this, and so how do I care for that? Okay, I also want to talk specifically about grief. I think this one is particularly related to Alzheimer's and dementia, although it is true in other caregiving journeys as well. It's an ongoing grief. And I think sometimes people don't name that or know what to call it because you are in stages, in layers, in small moments and little losses in an ongoing way, losing a little bit of the person that you knew before. And again, not to you know, I don't want to duplicate what Dana was saying, but she described that very well, to say like things were changing and the behavior, she said it's important for us to remember who my dad was, because so much of that was being lost. And so a lot of people think of grief as when that person has passed, and certainly there is grief when someone has passed, but actually for people in long-term caregiving, that grief backs up several years, because you're not able to relate to that person in the same way. Their physical mobility or connection changes, their personality can sometimes change, their ability to engage in all the ways, and so it's just that, it's these like sort of, in trauma work we talk about like the paper cuts that accumulate, and so it's not the one paper cut, but these little things that accumulate over time and really, really can deplete that, and you're in that grief journey long before someone passes if that is the end of their chronic illness journey. Of course, lots of people are in seasons where they rally and move forward, but with Alzheimer's and dementia, it tends to be degenerative, right? So I think it's important to call it grief, to recognize that that's what you're feeling, and so then when you feel the things that go along with grief, like bargaining, or anger, or depression, or hope. There's different things that swirl together in that grief journey, in those what we call the stages of grief, but of course they're non-linear. And if you're grieving this living grief that's active, it's ongoing, you're going to find that you're going to wonder where all those emotions are coming from. Yes, exactly right. Lynn's doing a nice visual for us here. I think of a swirled spaghetti, mess of spaghetti. That's how things intertwine, you know, in our emotional realm and in grief. And so I just want to note that, name that, give you the language for that, and recognize that part of this is a grief journey. And there may be the things that you can use to capture along the way things that are being lost, whether that's capturing a voice note, or journaling little changes, and capturing the small joys, or having conversations with people who remember, you know, your person before they were changing, to kind of keep those memories alive, keep connected to the fullness of that, and back the camera up a little bit in the journey. We talked to this already. Your well-being matters too. There are serious health risks that can happen to people if they neglect themselves in caregiving. You know, if you want to have the ability to have the stamina to be available and continue to care, it's that classic oxygen mask analogy, right? If you're in a plane and the plane's going down and you try and put someone else's oxygen mask on before yours, you're not going to be any good to anyone. And so there are some concerns with the stress and fatigue that actually can complicate the caregiver's health. And so we want to be mindful of that. I think it's important to recognize the cost of that. And so we want to be as thoughtful and intentional as we can, so that we're not unintentionally causing further health challenges to develop. Self-care is not selfish. It's not. It's about that full breath living. We're not intended to just constantly output with no input, and so we need to find ways to balance that as best as we can imperfectly, recognizing different seasons and the movement of that. But if, you know, even brief things that you can do when it doesn't feel like what I really need is a full week's vacation in, you know, in sunny somewhere where people are bringing me, you know, strawberry daiquiris or something, right? That's what I need. But you might have to settle for a tea and a 5-minute reprieve on your back porch. But don't dismiss those small things, because the way I like to describe this is with stress, we have a capacity, and I started talking about this in the podcast, which is audio. We don't do a video one. But it was on video because I was capturing it on Zoom. So I started doing this analogy with my hands partway through the podcast. So when you listen to the podcast, you realize when I caught myself and said, oh, I realize now we're audio and we're doing this. But if you think about your stress capacity, this is true of all of us. We have a capacity, maybe this is like zen, chill, on the beach, no stress vibe. And up here is our tipping point into what would be hypo or hyper arousal. And where we just feel like our coping is out. we have the ability to fluctuate in that space with any given thing. You know, we have a tough conversation with a work colleague, and then we take a walk at lunch and there's a little bit of a reprieve. But what can happen, especially to caregivers, is you get sort of this kind of like, I had a little bit, I got 1 cup of tea, then we had this, I got this much. So you get little bits, but like, it's not enough little bits. But if you can imagine that if you're moving through those stressors and you keep offering little pressure valve releases, you might have a big stressor of having to decide on a care plan or something like that, a really, really tough decision that you have to make as a family, which escalates your stress. But if you just have little moments of conversation here, a cup of tea, a good night's sleep, you know, it'll start to dissipate that. So you just want to keep within that range that keeps you from that tipping point into more of a trauma response that puts you into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, which is a conversation for another day. If you are interested in trauma, I've been a guest on the Connexus audio podcast speaking about trauma to explain trauma responses, and so that resource is available to you as well. Okay, building and accepting support. Again, upstairs, she alluded to this as well. We have a lot of really great helpers in the Presbyterian Church. Like, I actually think that this denomination, having been part of lots of different congregations, is really known well for its helping. We have a lot of willing, helping people who genuinely care in practical ways. At least that's been my experience of this in the local church, and I think that's true. And I think that's a beautiful thing about our tradition. But we often don't receive help very well. And so I'm going to tell you a quick little story about something that happened with me that helped me start to be more of a person who could think about the ebb and flow of the giving and receiving help. So, as I said before, I have 4 children. Fraser is the youngest. When he was born, a few months after he was born, I had an acute onset of labyrinthitis, which comes on kind of like a stroke, and essentially it debilitates you from like a movement. So it's like you're motion sick consistently. And so I had 4th baby, brand new, and I could not drive or read or make a meal or rock him or hold him or do any of that for 4 months. And I was seriously debilitated, and right when I got over that, actually my appendix almost ruptured, and so I was in the hospital with a appendectomy, emergency appendectomy, and then I couldn't lift my child because of all of it. So it was about a 6-month illness leave, not a mat leave, even though I was on a mat leave from my teaching career. I thought, wait, I need another mat leave. I only got a sick leave this time. But anyway, by the grace of God, I had beautiful neighbors and friends, and I had to have someone with me 24/7 because I could not navigate like space. Like, I could fall down. I couldn't steady myself. I couldn't be responsible to care for a brand new newborn. There was very little that I could do, and it's very humbling and very difficult. And I was really struggling because I am a very capable person. I do a lot of things, and I help a lot of people, and I am an active, engaged person in my world, and so I was like, this is terrible, right? For all the reasons that it was terrible. And one of my beautiful friends said to me, her name is Jo, she said, Sarah, this is your time to receive help. You have had seasons where you have been the helper, and you will have seasons again when you are the helper, but in this season, you are not the helper. You need to not rob me, this is my friend, and us, of the joy of helping you and returning that to you in your season of need. It will ebb and it will flow, but do not take that away from me because you're not receiving it. That was really important for me to understand because I hadn't thought about that. I thought about all the ways that I love to give and support people, and how that made me feel to offer that kindness and practical care, but I hadn't thought about my resistance to receiving help preventing someone who loves me from being able to do that for me. And so that was a real turning point for me, and I think for caregivers, there is no way through this journey without help. And it's going to increase and decrease with different factors that change depending on your unique circumstance with the caregiving. But you need to start to be someone who is able to say, I can receive this. I can ask for this. I can think of specific things and not feel that pride element preventing me from wanting to say, we need this. Yes.
I was wondering, how do you balance when you're caring for someone and you feel your own decline? Like you experienced that severely and your
Yes.
friend spoke to you about it.
Yeah.
But generally, how do we manage that? Like, how can we manage that? You don't have to answer right now, just think on it.
The one thing that comes to mind immediately, but let's keep percolating on it, is we have to start to say out loud what's true. A lot of times that comes to mind, that silent suffers, like we just hold it in, we don't speak, we don't.
And it becomes like a pressure cooker.
That's right, yeah. And the thing is, you know, the expression is, if we don't take time for our wellness, you'll be forced to take time for your illness.
Yeah.
And so that
That's
pressure,
good. That's
yeah,
good.
that pressure cooker. So I think we have to externalize it. We have to put it on the table. I love the scripture that actually says, confess our sins. Not that this is, I'll get to my point with it. Confess our sins one to another, that we can be healed. And I think in the heart of that, and I'm not the theologian in the room, so, you know, Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in the heart of that, I believe, is that there is power in saying what is.
Yeah.
And putting it on the table. And the confession is agreement. It's saying, hey, guess what? I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And then that gives you a starting point for that healing to say, oh, now we can address this thing. We all know things that until we say them and name them, we're not going to find healing from them. We're not going to find solutions because they're buried.
We can't suffer in silence.
You can't. Well, I mean, in fact, you are.
We do.
But we want to. That's why I think that's such an important part of the research is to recognize, like, we want to raise you out of that silence because we see that that's what's happening.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you're welcome. And of course, I'm always going to be an advocate for therapy. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think sometimes it's very hard to voice those things in family settings because there's family dynamics that are at play, right? And lots of people don't understand. So sometimes you need that unbiased, objective professional who knows how to speak to you and walk you through that and help you get some clarity about even how to figure out what you need. Because you might be like, well, I'm willing to receive help, but I don't know what I need. So even those kinds of conversations can be helping conversations. Sometimes it can be helpful to look at, you know, we'll talk a little bit about education and boundaries in terms of our deep dives on the internet, but sometimes it can be helpful to look at, like, for example, an Alzheimer's Association, like, what kinds of things have been helpful to people before? Because maybe you don't know, but then you see a list, like she was mentioning a number of things upstairs as well about practical kinds of helps, like maybe you're like, oh, I didn't even think about it would be helpful to me if I didn't have to take my person grocery shopping and someone could sit with them. Or if they could help me get set up with a delivery service online because I don't know how to engage with that. You know, the computer technology, but having somebody deliver to the house would make a big difference. Like sometimes you don't know until you hear things that might help somebody else and you can say, oh, that's amazing. So an example of this too, that I share all the time because it's so helpful, is a lot of times when people pass away, they will bring, you know, casseroles and things, which is wonderful and, you know, such a blessing to families. But often kids are not wanting to eat that food. And when I was a young mom, whenever I would hear of that, I would get 2 bags of groceries that were healthy snacks that were easy for kids' lunches and food so they could grab it instead of doing a casserole, because I knew my own kids would just pick away at, you know, carrot and celery sticks or a cheese string or like an applesauce pack. Like, and so moms still have to make lunches and their kids are not going to eat all the stuff that's mixed together sometimes. And that's not every family. Maybe other moms are way better than me at getting their kids to eat that stuff. But it took some time, different kids. But I just thought, like, what can I do to, like, think about how I would be doing? Because they would still have that pressure. Like, I have all this food, but I still can't feed my kids. And so I started to do something like that as a creative. Now, that's not that they don't want the lasagnas, it's just I'm filling a gap that I recognize as a need. So paying attention to little things like that and thinking, how can I creatively offer that help? Okay, how are we doing for time? Janice, don't holler at me.
Oh, you're okay.
Oh, we're good. Okay, we're good. Okay, so number 5, protect your mental health. Again, this doesn't have to be a major undertaking, but there has to be moments where you can check in with yourself and the narratives that you are running about what's happening with you to try and get yourself to a healthier, more hopeful, stabilized, grounded place. On the handout I'm going to give you at the end, there's a few quick little techniques, a couple of breathing techniques, an affirmation, a grounding technique that you can go to actually calm your nervous system and think about that stress where it's like just a little pressure valve release. I don't have to get myself back here. That might not be a reasonable thing to ask in a season of caregiving, but can I do a couple things here and there in the day that literally, while I'm in the washroom, which is the only time you get away from, whatever's happening, this is me going back to early children, right? I can take a few deep breaths and re-regulate my nervous system and do that while I'm in the washroom. Seems like a funny example, but it's the reality, right? Right? Just, I can take 2 minutes before I start driving or before I come in from the house to ground myself before I go in, right? And we often are just rushing and rushing, but there are these 2 little mindful moments, like little pockets where we can check in. We can do a breath prayer and ask for the strength of God, to be with us as we go into things. And so having those little interventions and also having places where you don't have to have it all together as a caregiver. So as she was saying, that keeping up of appearances, that pressure, I just wish we could let go of that, full stop for everything in our culture, but we don't. And so there's a book, some of you may not know this too, so part of the Cubby Wellness Center, we have a bookshop, and the bookshop actually also has an emphasis on Christian spirituality, so there's a lot of really great integrated resources in that intersection. But, oh my goodness, I totally lost my train of thought there. It'll come back to me. Maybe. The pressure of having to keep up appearances. Wow, this is highly ironic. But anyway, there's this sense in which we have to keep it together, and there's a couple of books in there that address that. Has anybody heard of Kate Bowler? Does anybody know what I'm talking about, Kate Bowler? Yeah, so she has a podcast called Everything Happens, and her first book was Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Believed, is the name of the book. And she went through her own cancer journey as a young mom, and so she really speaks in a very broad, kind of a specific style that she has about that kind of a health journey that just rattles you. But she's really speaking into the space of that vulnerability of we have to just be honest about how we are and how we're doing, and that this is not okay, and that we're not doing well, and start to be a culture that's okay with, yeah, I'm kind of a mess, and you're kind of a mess, and we're all kind of messy here together, and that's okay because we're human beings with messes. And I think what was coming to mind before, which has come back now, is there's a book that says, that's called, by Laura Tremaine, called Share Your Stuff, I'll Go First, right? And it's this invitation to say, maybe if I could be courageous to say, yeah, I remember, being in a culture where a lot of the young moms, and this is just because it's my experience to share, not to co-opt that, but I remember being in a culture thinking all these other moms are loving things like nursing and babies, and I'm I do not love this, but I don't feel like I can say this because all these other people seem to actually thrive and they're so excited in this stage, and I'm thinking, I'm some kind of weirdo if I'm not doing okay. Well then, of course, if I take the risk to say, is anybody else kind of finding this your brain is going to mush? And my husband asked me the other day when I'm going back to work, and it was week 3 of my mat leave, And so I think we have to take the risk and say, anybody else? And you know what you're gonna find? Yeah, a lot of those moms felt that way. And I was making this assumption about how everybody was doing so great, and we were all actually kind of tanking and crying in our closets together, or whatever, right? So we have to risk some vulnerability, I think, in that authenticity, but it does invite other people to be yeah, this is hard. I'm not doing okay. And we can just be there for each other in bearing one another's burdens as we're called to do, and you know, rejoice and mourn together as the seasons allow. So, so protect your mental health by not stuffing it, by externalizing it, by taking little moments to release that stress. Number 6, we're at, I think they're numbered properly in yours too. Balance education with boundaries. And so this is really about the deep dives we can do on the internet and how we can get into these bunny trails and really almost inundate ourselves with too much that we don't have the ability to process. So you want to stay informed, but you also need to set practical boundaries, like how much time you're going to spend going down that rabbit trail on WebMD or whatever. And so what I usually say to people, a couple things here: put practical limits, like I'm going to spend an hour looking at how people handle this in their families, and then that's the end. Like when that, whatever I found out by that time, that's as much time and energy as I can give to that. Or things like, I'm not going to do that after 8 p.m. You know, that's a morning activity, right? Thinking strategically about when you're doing some of that, because there's a lot of information out there, and you need to be able to put limits on that. And I would also encourage you to choose your voices. So what I mean by that is decide your key people or organizations or websites that you feel, generally speaking, that's reliable. This is, you know, the Alzheimer's Association, so like it's a trusted source that's a good go-to for me. You know, whatever it might be for your particular caregiving need. You know, the classic example is when you're, again, a new parent, just as an example, people are giving you every one of their favorite parenting books. Well, you're going to be really confused as a parent if you read more than 1 or 2 parenting books, because this person is going to have this philosophy and this person is going to have this philosophy, and you're going to very quickly feel like you're not doing anything right, and you're overwhelmed and in like paralysis.
And your mother's going to have a totally...
And your mother is going to give you her book of how to
Dr. Spock.
Yes, exactly. So we all know this. It's true of that overwhelm of information. Like, it's wonderful that we've access to information, but it's also very overwhelming. And so you can also get into deep dives in like Facebook chats and stuff that can be helpful, but watch for the tipping point to where they're impacting your mental health. Because if you're going through your own journey and you're hearing about everybody else's trauma, maybe you don't have, like, there's a fine line between having a supportive group and having people around and entering into too many stories that you can't metabolize, right? So just watch for those things, put boundaries on it, choose the people that you feel are your go-to people, your care providers, your doctors, your therapist, whoever, but limit that to a small number of people, because you don't want to get yourself overwhelmed, and take some time off, but don't fall into that deep vortex of the internet.
5 minutes, Sarah.
5 minutes, okay. Yeah. Preserve your identity, right? So this is about remembering that you are more than just a caregiver. That this is not the only thing you do. This is not the only thing you are. This is not the whole of your life. Tanya, on the podcast, she shared about one thing that was really freeing for her was her sister saying to her, like, Mom would not want us to have our whole life co-opted by what's happening. Like, that would not please her. She would want us to be free to care for ourselves, and like, it would be dishonoring to her if we never had any joy because we were so overly focused and consumed. And that was a really liberating thing for her to think about, because it just felt like her duty and her love and care of her mom had to have this overwhelming focus. And I'm not suggesting that there are seasons where it's very difficult to, again, step away. There's lots of nuance in the conversation. But you have not stopped being a person with hobbies and interests and friends and joy and often a career and other people that, things happening in your life that you still have to deal with. And so, preserve that part of your identity. Don't let it become, I am only a caregiver, and lose that part of yourself. So reconnect. Get out with friends, get outside in nature, do something active, have a great conversation, join an art class, do something that makes you feel like, oh, there I am again, right? Number 8, feel all your feelings. I think the biggest point here that I would want to say is you are human and all your feelings are information, okay? They're not wrong or right or good or bad. They're just trying to tell you what's going on with you, and so you can welcome them. Even if they're angry, even if they're resentful, even if they're frustrated, even if they're depressing, sad, discouraged, they're just trying to move the human experience through you in the way that emotions are designed to do. And so make space for them. Let yourself feel them. I always say to people, if you need to cry and you hold back on crying, I recognize sometimes, you have to wait for a later moment. But if you never let yourself cry and your body is telling you you need to cry, your body is giving you this signal to help you detoxify, right? We actually move chemicals out through tears that need to come out of our bodies. And when we say it's a good cry, like there's a reason that it's a good cry, and we feel like we have emptied ourselves because we have. Physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, you read the Psalms and cry out to God with whatever feelings you have, because the man after God's own heart did that in so many ways in those scriptures. And so you borrow the language from David to express your frustration or your sadness or your overwhelm or loneliness or whatever it is. Let yourself feel your feelings, because feelings will move through you if you welcome them. They will accumulate and start to build in problematic ways if you don't. So it's not about judging what the feelings, they're all valid. You'll move through them, you'll find your way. And this is something, again, where if you're struggling with that, that might be a spot to reach out to somebody who has some ability to walk you through that, like a therapist. Because emotions can feel really complex and unable to be tolerated. But most of why we're afraid to feel our feelings is because we feel like we're going to get stuck in that feeling and not be able to get out. We're afraid we're going to be flooded. And so you want to be careful about that, but also all feelings are fluid. They're not final. So even if you cry your heart out for 24 hours in a really deep grief time, you're not going to be doing that for 24 days straight. It will shift and it will move through you, and it's your body's way, the way God designed us to try and process. My mentor always said the only way through grief is to grieve. That's the way God gave us. And so we have to mourn, we have to lament, we have to do those things. Okay, number 9, you are not alone. This is really important. We have a huge room here of people who've come to this for whatever reason you've come to this, because you're interested in this topic or feel that you know someone or you are someone in a caregiving role, or you know that you've been in seasons before and might be again. You're not alone. This is a real thing that people are going through in our human experience. And so connect with others who understand. One thing Tanya said in the podcast was that one of the most helpful things for her was talking with other people who had enough of a similar experience that they understood. So she had a few friends, sadly, that their moms were also going through a dementia journey. And their conversations were just so life-giving to her, hard, and they would cry together. But she could say, this happened with Mom, and she didn't have to have a full pamphlet of all the details and give them back. It's just they're like, oh yeah, I know when that happened for us. Or, there's that shared lived experience that just becomes a bond that you can build on, and you don't have to explain yourselves or make people understand, because they get it. So whatever your journey is, finding some people who are maybe walking the same road, whether that's formally or informally. And remembering also that what you're doing does matter. So that it is that sacred work. But that you are a person that needs consideration in the midst of that sacred work, so that you can keep doing the sacred work. And it's okay to, it's not just okay, it is okay. But it's more than okay, it's required that you get your own help and support in the format that is going to work for you. Okay, how did I do, Janice? We good? 2 minutes over. We're over. I have a room for, I'm going to pass these around. Oh, I did want to do a little shout out to Matt Rutan, who you all know, or maybe don't know, but he's out there. The funny story is we didn't write this together. I feel like I'm holding this book and showing it to him as if I'm part of it. I'm not really part of it. We have written some articles together. We've been on each other's podcasts. This is the first time we've met each other in the flesh because COVID is a weird thing. And so I did want to say too, though, like little things like this, I'm just giving a shout out to him for his book Turbulence, if you don't already have it, or his daily, because little snippets are often what you can grab when you're in a season of caregiving. It's hard to go through like a big thing, so things that you can pick up that are just talking about, you know, a short little devotional within 2 minutes. I can grab this, reorient my heart and mind, you know, connect with God and feel like I get a new perspective. So this one, Devotionals to Steady You Through the Storms of Life, is, I think, the one he pulled out through sort of COVID or towards the end of COVID. I'm pretty sure that's right. So something like that can be a really helpful little resource to just have by your bedside or have in your purse or along the way. Lots of great other options for resources. Now, I did just pull from the internet, so I'm just going to give a disclaimer on this. These are a number of research recommended resources. Again, I'm not an expert in this field, so I will offer them to you with that disclaimer that this is what the internet has decided are the most recommended resources. There's a number of websites, but worth maybe checking out to see if that might be a help to you if you're in that particular time. And then on the other side, we have a little calm down toolkit, which is what I was talking about, 5 little tools that you can pull out to help sort of calm that overwhelm that comes from the caregiving role. Okay, I'm gonna maybe just, would somebody mind passing these out and then I can stay up and answer questions? Or can I do this teacher thing and I'll put like half on this side and then put a friend person and you pass it back and then take it from there? Oh, and there are a few extras around, so I've given everybody a bookmark as well from Heavy Wellness Center, so that gives you our location. I know some of you are out of town, but so if you, I don't know when we're wrapping up here, but we are open to 3 o'clock today, so if you want to pop in and putter about, we're open at the center. But we're always here, we're closed Sunday, Monday. So you should pop in, you don't have to. Okay. Any questions? I know we had one earlier. Yeah, Sandy, go for it.
What do you do if you have no, family support from your immediate family? I can judge, for example, when my husband was going to cancer.
Yeah.
And from 2004 to 2006, and they were out of town, but, and one of them lived right next door to me.
Yeah.
And never once offered to help with anything. Never offered to take clinical treatments or do anything.
Yeah.
And I was at my good end because I thought
So feeling
my
isolated.
kids were away, both working jobs and one in the States. So I did what, well, one of his nurses said that he needed to go and talk to our psychologist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I did.
Yeah.
While she was there. Now, I didn't say that, at the time, I didn't tell her that I was without, you know, help.
Practical help.
Practical help.
Yeah.
That was close to me. I got help from neighbors, but not anybody who was directly related to us.
Yeah. So
So what I said, what she said was, you have to look after yourself. That's number 1 priority. And you're not doing it.
Yes.
And I said I was coming in, every treatment I was coming up, big smile on my face, everything was okay, but I knew where the end was going.
Yeah.
And because I've been through it before.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to handle it. And she said, so what do you do? I told her. She said, why don't you just go for a walk on the beach and scream and yell your head out?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. I took the dog and we went for a long walk on the beach.
Let it come
And
out.
it used to be the day after the treatment that it would hit me, and I don't know why. I had to keep a face on for him, but
But you gave yourself that permission.
I said, I have to do this. And that's exactly what she said. Give yourself permission to do that.
Yeah.
She said, what do you do? I said, I take the dog for a walk on the beach. Well, scream and yell and holler.
Yeah.
You're only yelling at water, nobody's gonna hear
Well, the
you.
water spirits heard you, I'm sure.
You know what?
Right,
There's
yeah.
there's an intervention that is not on the sheet, but this is something I often recommend to people who are really dealing with that overwhelming emotion. It's what I just simply call it the prayer walk, but the concept is that you have your starting point wherever it is, your home, let's say, and then as you move away from that starting point, you just empty yourself out to God. Maybe that's internally, maybe that's out loud to the, all on the beach or wherever, but the purpose is you just keep walking away from that center home point, as an example, until you feel like you've emptied yourself out. And then you pivot and you start walking back towards where you started. And the goal of that time is just to listen and to receive and to be open-handed for what needs to come in. And it's really effective for people because they just, again, I mentioned the Psalms, but I feel like the Psalms have that kind of an arc where it's like, rah! Okay, but the goodness of God is with me, right? But I'm overly simplifying, but that's a normal human experience of emptying out and then offering to be filled. And something about I'm walking this way to dump it all. And then when I feel like it's all just come out, then I can be like, okay, and I'm going, and I'm holding my hands open, or my heart posture in that open-handedness to say, now I'm listening to the birds, I'm hearing the waves, I'm sensing God's presence with me, something, right? And it might be a still small voice that we're not hearing because we're in the ragey until we quiet that down and let it come forward. So
See, my fear is that I'll do that
and you'll never stop
in
walking.
front of my son.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
Just
Well, that's
blowing
what I
my stack,
So better to do it in spots where you feel like this is a safe
in a
place.
pillow or something.
Yeah, and it's to find that spot to say this has to come out, and I don't want it to come out sideways in front of my son or in front, I want it needs to emerge, but I want to be in control of that, right?
Yeah.
We have this saying, I don't want to keep this too much longer, we have this saying in our family that comes from my son Wes. So some of you know Wes. Wes is 6'6" and he will take anyone out. He's the strongest person I know. He was my smallest baby, so don't go fooling yourself about anything with birth weight. But anyway, he's a great big grizzly bear with a teddy bear heart, and he has a lot of anger. And he said to me, he was trying to deal with that when he was little, and I talked to him about having a pop bottle that was swirling, and you can imagine a 2-liter pop bottle, it's swirling, it's shaking up, it's swirling. If you open that pop bottle in the presence of a bunch of people in the middle of a kitchen, what's going to happen? It's going to be a mess. It's going to be all over everybody. And I said, well, what? So how could you get the pressure out of that pop bottle without the mess? And he's like, take it to the bathtub. Smart.
You got a smart kid.
True. And I'm like, tell me more about that, because I'm also thinking yeah, you could soak in the tub and that would be good. But he's just if I open it in the bathtub, it will be enclosed and it won't hurt anyone, and it can come out and it can go down the drain and it won't make a mess. And that's the thing.
And then mommy will clean it after.
And then, but it's that idea that we often misquote scripture and say that anger is sin. Anger is not sin. God gave us anger. I can talk a lot about anger. If you want to do a workshop on anger sometime, I'll do it. But anger is not sin. It's in your anger, do not sin. It's not anger that's the sin. Anger is a sign that something's not right. And so there's an invitation to take it to the bathtub. It's got to come out, but let's not have it be in a way that causes wreckage over people, right? That's where we go wrong. So I'll leave you with Wes's little. He's probably oh my gosh, Mom, can you stop sharing that stuff?
Redhead psychology.
Thank you, everybody. If you want, there's a few extra bookmarks and handouts. So if you know of someone else who maybe wanted to come to this one and went to the other one, you might want it. By all means, take an extra and give somebody. Lots of ways to find me.
Your videotaping, will this be a podcast on the website?
I don't know actually what you're doing with the videotaping. I'm allowing it, but I'm not sure I think it'll be posted maybe on the Presbytery website. Yes. So we can link it, but yeah, there's lots of stuff on the website that might be helpful too.